James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else?
Silent Hill 2 is a 2001 survival horror game published by Konami on the PlayStation 2, with the soundtrack composed by Akira Yamaoka and lead art director being Masahiro Ito. The Silent Hill series is one that is lodged in the hearts of many, and for many different reasons. Either the player experienced it too soon in their life, and they were scared away by it, the imagery crawling into their subconscious, and the loud crashing music slipping them into nightmare after nightmare. Or maybe the stories hold personal meaning to the player, and the traumas and tribulations each character faced throughout their retrospective and dangerous journey throughout the infamous Silent Hill. Or possibly these games bring comfort, funnily enough, to some. The ethereal music and unsettling but almost relaxing setting of an empty town bringing them to a place of peace. We will not be talking about Silent Hill 1 or 3 or any of the other games following, but just Silent Hill 2. About what it means, the characters, the monsters, the moving soundtrack, the endings, and how the story affected many that lived to play through it. Turn your lights off, get comfy, and let's talk about Silent Hill 2. It's only down from here. For those uninitiated in what Silent Hill even is, or just never delved into the series, I highly recommend you play the game for yourself or watch someone play it if you're too scared to experience it on your own. This video is going to contain heavy spoilers for the entire game, so fair warning. I will give a brief explanation on what Silent Hill as a town is, however. Silent Hill is a small resort town in the state of Maine, built along the shores of Tolka Lake, an area that used to be bustling with tourism, now abandoned. The city is surrounded by towering hills, thick forests, and winding rivers. Due to the town being located so close to the lake, it's often foggy or misty. The name of that town is Silent Hill. Although it is known as a scenic resort area, it is a cursed place where the town's former inhabitants were once driven away, brutal executions were once carried out, and a mysterious plague was once prevalent. The town is centered around Tolka Lake, from which a thick fog perpetually enshrouds the area and makes vague the reality and dreams of those who visit the town. And according to those who have seen them, there are also times when things that should not naturally exist appear. Silent Hill's dark history contrasts with its calming, rural town atmosphere. The town is surrounded by rumors and horrific events, housing drug distributions, being a portal to hell, being built on a burial ground, people being spirited away, among many other things. Silent Hill is also known for the alternate reality it can bring passerbys to, called the Otherworld. The sound of raid sirens fills your ears as you walk through a door that seemed normal just before. You feel the world shift around you, hallways seeming dimmer and longer. Things just don't make sense anymore. You feel like there's blood under your feet. You smell iron all around you. All of your nightmares are becoming a reality. Now you may ask yourself, why would anyone in their right mind come to Silent Hill? For the most part, it's not on purpose. Silent Hill was a resort town after all, so some may have found themselves there in its prime before it was completely abandoned. Silent Hill, in my opinion, is kind of like a purgatory. to drag people with their issues left uncared for and thrown to the wayside for them to face these fears in person. Either they will come to peace with these issues, or they will die resenting them. James Sunderland is our protagonist in Silent Hill 2. He arrives to Silent Hill with a letter from his wife, Mary Sunderland, remarking that she has been dead for 3 years, but has received a mysterious letter from her. Written in her delicate handwriting, it exclaimed that she was waiting for him in their special place in Silent Hill. And so James takes a look at himself in the mirror, wondering if this really is real, or all just his imagination. Questioning the decisions that brought him back to this town years later. He looks up, steps out into the familiar misty air of Silent Hill, and goes to find his beloved Mary. Throughout James's journey through Silent Hill, he is constantly asking about Mary and her whereabouts, and upon hearing any sign of someone knowing of her existence, interrogates for answers. It seemed like Mary and James had a peaceful and stable relationship, but as we delve into James's subconscious and watch him fight his demons that surround him in Silent Hill, we learn it's a lot more complex than that. Prior to visiting Silent Hill, Mary contracted a terminal disease, which caused her to have mood swings and to lash out at the people she cared about most.
I was so angry all the time, and I struck out at everyone I loved most. Especially you, James.
Her doctor predicted that she had less than 3 years to live, and that there was no treatment that could help her. James questioned the doctors and looked through medical books, but never found anything of use. Mary herself mentioned the doctors were, quote-unquote, making a nice profit off of her, and the disease and the drugs were making her look like a, quote-unquote, monster. James started to visit her less due to her being very emotional and him not being able to quite understand what she wanted or why she was acting like that towards him. He began to drink, quote-unquote, a fair bit to escape the pain, the loneliness, the suffering. But it never changed. Mary started to become a burden for James. He started to resent her, and in his words, he wanted his life back. Through his torment, though, he still loved her, and seeing her in so much pain broke him down, to the point he was in constant states of sadness and mourning. He eventually couldn't take it anymore. On a visit, he walked up to Mary's bed, placed a kiss on her forehead, before suffocating her with a pillow. He then carried her body out to his car and gently placed it in the back seat. Mentioned in the Book of Lost Memories, the real intention for going to Silent Hill was to kill himself, and in the town him and his wife enjoyed so much. The town he promised he would bring her back to, but never did. During that fateful drive, he experienced psychological repression before arriving to Silent Hill, repressed the memories of killing Mary, and convinced himself that she had been dead for 3 years from the illness she suffered from. The letter that Mary supposedly wrote to him can be looked at later on in the game, and is revealed to be a hallucination, as the paper is completely blank. The idea that her body is still in the back of that car is haunting. Maria is a major character and one of the antagonists in Silent Hill 2. She meets James in Rosewater Park, and after clinging to him, begs James to protect her since she is without a weapon. Upon James meeting Maria, he thinks she is Mary, and she gives him a slight smile. She asks him if she looks like his girlfriend, and he explains she looks like his late wife, and that she could be her twin. That her face and voice were identical, but her hair and her clothes were different. She immediately grabs his hand and places it on her chest to prove how warm she is and that she's not a ghost. Her demeanor is very seductive to the tone of her voice, flirting, and body language. Maria to James is everything he wanted Mary to be. The instruction manual describes her as the opposite of Mary, being cheerful and energetic, but she is also dark and moody. She often tantalizes James throughout their encounters. It is possible she also contains the spirit of Mary within her, knowing things even James didn't know about her. It would make sense knowing that Mary's body is in Silent Hill, being in the back of James' car. Maria is often put into situations where she dies gruesomely, and always in front or around James. Whether it's James discovering her corpse in the hospital bed with face scars and injuries reminiscent of his wife's facial disfigurements from her illness, escaping Pyramid Head through an elevator and watching Maria get skewered before the elevator door closes, or James being forced to watch Maria get impaled by 2 Pyramid Heads, she is forced to be reincarnated and go through many violent deaths, which very much distresses James throughout. To me personally, this is a reminder for James of the repressed memories of killing Mary, having to suffer through that death over and over before coming to terms with it. During the end of the game, Maria can change her appearance to pose as Mary on the Lakeview Hotel roof to try to make James accept her. When he refuses, she tells him that he deserves to die as well, and goes to the extreme and tries to kill him. She is incredibly attached to him, and very much wishes for him to remain in the fantasy world with her, rather than accepting the murder of his wife. Angela Orozco is the first character you meet in Silent Hill, pacing in confusion around the graveyard looking at names etched on the headstones. When confronted by James, she gasps in fright and takes a couple steps back from him to keep her distance. Upon request for directions to Silent Hill, she awkwardly stutters and notes that the town has something wrong with it. She seems to have a hard time asserting herself, as when James seems to blow her off, she yells,
I'm not lying!
Angela gives off a childish nature when she exclaims that she's looking for her quote-unquote mama, quickly rephrasing to say mother instead. She also mentions that she thought her father and brother were in Silent Hill, but she can't find them anywhere. Angela is an emotionally broken young woman, being tormented by her past of being mentally, physically, and sexually abused by her father and brother. She constantly has low self-esteem and a timid personality throughout Silent Hill, telling James not to pity her because, quote-unquote, she's not worth it. Similarly to James, she had murdered both her father and brother upon arriving to Silent Hill, and could possibly be repressing these memories of murdering them like James is repressing the memory of murdering Mary. The knife she uses to attempt suicide before she gives it to James was the one she used on her father and her brother. Multiple times throughout Silent Hill, she exhibits suicidal tendencies and doesn't see the point of living anymore. She tells James it's quote-unquote what she deserves, and that it's quote-unquote easier to run when confronted before attempting suicide with a knife on the floor. The idea of suicide is both escapism and punishment. She mentioned her mother said that she deserved it, and she agrees with that statement. In one scene after confronting the abstract daddy enemy, she begins to beat the corpse of the monster. The walls of the room are fleshy, and there are holes in the walls with pistons going in and out, over and over, never stopping. She turns to James and confuses him for her mother, implying her mother possibly helped her out of situations with her brother and father during physical or sexual abuse. James tries to console her by putting his hand out, but she lashes out at him, telling him to keep his hands off of her, asking him about Mary, and then leaving the room. The final scene with Angela is in the Lakeview Hotel. She stands on the burning staircase, blood-stained, skinned corpses framed up on either side of her, the strewn-up bodies of her brother and father with the genitals ripped off of them. She confuses James for her mother and embraces him, but snaps out of it. She thanks him for saving her earlier, but says that she also wishes he never did, because she wanted to die. When James pities her, she says that she's not worth it.
Or maybe you think you can save me. Will you love me? Take care of me? Heal all my pain? That's what I thought.
She then asks James to give the knife back, and James refuses. She asks if he's saving it for himself, and he says,
Me? No. I'd never kill myself.
Which is ironic, since the reason he came to Silent Hill was to commit suicide. She begins to walk up the stairs, and James comments on how hot the room is.
You see it too? For me, it's always like this.
And so, she walks up the stairs to find another way to end her life, once and for all. Laura is a young girl wandering the empty streets of Silent Hill, and is also looking for Mary Sunderland, but is unaware of her passing due to her misinterpreting a message she received from Mary, saying, "I'm far away now, in a beautiful place," thinking she meant Silent Hill and not heaven. Laura is an orphan who befriended Mary and became very attached to her. They were both patients at a hospital under the care of the same nurse, and quickly became close friends. Mary talked about Silent Hill a lot, and so the confusion of Mary's letter to her with Silent Hill is understandable. Laura is unable to see the monsters roaming of Silent Hill like any of the other characters due to her innocence. She has no darkness in her heart, so to her, Silent Hill is nothing more than an empty town. Laura is introduced as rude and bratty to James when he meets her in the woodside apartments. While trying to reach for a key behind some bars, Laura playfully kicks the key out of reach from him and then steps on his hand, mocking him, promptly running away after. Throughout Silent Hill, she taunts James and reveals that she knows something more about Mary when he meets her outside, before jumping off the other side of the wall she was sitting on before James could ask any more questions. In the Lakeview Hotel, Laura scares James by playing a familiar piano chord, one Mary possibly played when she was alive, and he used to watch her play the piano. She shows James the letter she received from Mary to prove her friendship. The message asks her not to be hard on James, and that she loved Laura like a daughter, and was hoping to adopt her, finally wishing her a happy 8th birthday. James promptly asks how old Laura is, and she said that she turned 8 last week. James becomes confused because he's still under the repressed assumptions Mary died 3 years prior. After watching the tape of him and Mary that they'd accidentally left in room 312 in the hotel, and remembering what happened fully, he reveals that he killed Mary, and Laura lashes out at him, saying that she knew he really didn't ever care about her. He looks away from her and apologizes.
The Mary you know isn't here.
And then she quietly leaves the room. Eddie Dombrowski is an insecure and bullied man. Being very self-conscious about himself and ridiculed from the start of his life, he is drawn to Silent Hill. After being an easy target by a football player during and after high school, Eddie retaliated and killed the bully's dog, which is something he gloats about later on in Silent Hill. After killing the dog, he shot the bully in the knee with his father's gun, crippling him. He fled to Silent Hill and then claimed the town, quote-unquote, called him there. James meets Eddie in the Woodside apartments after finding him puking in a toilet after he found a discovered corpse in the fridge. He immediately starts claiming that he didn't do it, and is incredibly defensive. Eddie was the one who brought Laura to Silent Hill after meeting her by chance on the way there and giving her a lift. Throughout Silent Hill, Laura bullies and mocks him, commenting on his gutless nature and weight, adding to his insecurities. Eddie is later seen in the labyrinth, somehow reappearing in the Tulka prison cafeteria. He's slumped up against a wall, almost corpse-like, muttering to himself.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head, pow.
There's a corpse sitting by the table, and James asked if Eddie killed him, and Eddie justifies it, saying he was, quote-unquote, making fun of him with his eyes. James tells him that he can't just kill a person based on the way they look at him, and he asks confused,
Oh yeah? Why not? Till now I always let people walk all over me.
He then brags about the bully's dog he killed, that he had it coming, but then says that he was joking. At the end of the labyrinth, James steps into Eddie's other world. He enters a room that's cold, and vents are all over the walls. Corpses lie all over the floor, and James, in horror, asks him what Eddie is doing. Eddie begins hurling insults that people have told him over the years.
It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And the corpse can't laugh. From now on, if anyone makes fun of me, I'll kill him Just like that.
He then proceeds to assault James upon the assumption that James also hates him. He then escapes to another room after being injured. The next room is full of bitter cold smoke, and mutilated, huge lumps of meat formed to look like overweight bodies on meat hooks littering the ceiling. He vents to James more and laughs over killing the bully's dog, and that it was fun watching it try to chew its own guts out and dying curled up in a little ball. He amusedly muses about when he shot the bully that he cried more than the dog did. The fight resumes, and after killing Eddie in self-defense, James is horrified that he murdered another human being, forgetting about Mary once more. There are a total of 10 monsters in Silent Hill 2. This is where the theories become a little more prominent since the symbolism of these monsters isn't set in stone for the most part. So, take what I say with some salt. The lying figure is the first monster James encounters, and after confronting it, receives the radio, an object that can detect abnormal creatures by changing radio frequencies. Their bodies are intertwined in a flesh-like straitjacket, the legs being feminine and seemingly wearing platform heels. They scurry across the floor at high speeds and make a wailing sound, nails on a chalkboard. Their main method of attack is spraying poison from their chest, and they must be kicked when on the ground before they get back up. Masahiro Ito has said he designed the lying figure to be reminiscent of Mary Shepard Sunderland in her state of terminal illness, writhing in pain and suffering, and James must witness it over and over whenever this monster comes into view.
Look like a monster.
The acid mist could be vomit, or, in a more metaphorical sense, the hateful words she spat at James when she was ill. The way it skitters is similar to an insect, and James has said how he wanted Mary out of his life, like a pest. The mannequin is another early monster James encounters in the Woodside apartments, coming to life behind the inert mannequin wearing Mary's clothes. Their two legs stacked on one another, and the top two pair are lacking feet. They strike with the top two legs and rub them together against one another, like an insect does its mandibles. This monster was likely created from the sexual urges and frustrations of James, and the novelization mentions they were quote-unquote born from lust. The introduction of Pyramid Head has him abusing two mannequins by groping them together. The sexual nature of these enemies is undisputed. The Bubblehead nurse appears in the Brookhaven Hospital. They emit almost human-like screeches. Every movement sounds like they're cracking their own bones. They are roughly the same height as Mary, according to Masahiro Ito, and wear a very sexualized Brookhaven nurse outfit. As also stated by Masahiro Ito, I would draw a scary nurse with a condom covering her whole face with a lot of thin blood and space between the condom and the surface of the face, when explaining their designs. The swollenness is very much reminiscent of Mary's appearance from her illness. When taking a closer look at the model, the bottom of the head resembles an infant's face. The baby face canonically symbolizes Mary and James's wish for a child, the dream that could never happen due to Mary's illness. The suffocation these nurses experience is a grim reminder to James, the subconscious memory of smothering his wife. There is another variant of the Bubblehead nurse that is found in the other world, garbed with tattered apparel and a mask with spikes driven through the eye sockets and a protrusion from the back shoulder. According to Masahiro Ito, this nurse was a last-minute addition, so the symbolism wavers. It can serve as a metaphor for Mary on her sickbed, which would make sense. Mary's eyes were almost swollen shut due to her illness, and the stakes driven into the eyes of the nurse could very much represent that. This is just my personal speculation, but it is possible these nurses also represent a possible affair James had with a nurse due to his sexual frustration. The skimpy outfit, the covered face to forget about the event. It's a stretch, but it's something I like to think about. The creeper is a giant insect, and it often moves very quickly and reacts when shown with light. They have a strong green tinge and make a low chirp, or the sound of a squeaky wheel. There is a room in the Historical Society after picking up a key. James's flashlight goes out and the door suddenly locks. After replacing the battery, he's swarmed by creepers, and there's so many that killing them is pointless, and James is required to guess the combination by the door to escape the room. The Book of Lost Memories states that it is assumed creepers are derived from the power of Silent Hill itself and not any of the characters, possibly lingering power from the events of Silent Hill 1. They could also represent Mary's disease, since many insects and pests can carry disease and illness. The Mandarin only appears in 3 areas of the entire game. They are found hanging below mesh grating on floors, hanging by their fleshy, mouth-like hands. The Mandarin are first encountered when James uses the passage that connects both ends of Saul Street. Their figures are very distorted and vaguely feminine. Their arms are grotesquely large, and they wear a straitjacket-like outfit. The ends of their arms appear to have large, human-like lips. They also look strikingly similar to the Closer from Silent Hill 3. Masahiro Ito explains that, "The reason the Mandarin and Closer have similar arm structure is because I wanted to connect Silent Hill 2 and 3. The Mandarin is just one of the most ignored enemies in Silent Hill 2, so I made the most of it to exist in Silent Hill 3. I wanted to express that Silent Hill's power does not only depend on quote-unquote the person, that is, James or Heather can ask Silent Hill's help to make these creatures involuntarily." According to the Book of Lost Memories, the Mandarin symbolizes feelings of being overwhelmed, anguished, and helpless, and it is explained that is the reason it is not permitted to stand on the ground. They are doomed to remain stuck under these metal grates, hanging by their lip-like hands, or else they will fall into the abyss below. This is possibly a metaphor for James's psyche. It is also theorized that the fact that they are only allowed to live in dark places and not above ground could also represent James's repressed emotions, and the tentacles that come from their hands to attack James if he gets too close could be his conscience. Also known as the Lustful Lips, the Flesh Lip is a monster and boss. James first encounters 3 of them when Laura tricks him and locks him inside of room 2 of the first floor of Brookhaven Hospital. After defeating these monsters, he is teleported to the Otherworld Hospital. These monsters appear as a strangely bloated and malformed mass of flesh with the human-like limbs coming out of the top of the suspended, rusty metal bed-like frame. It attacks by attempting to strangle James with its legs. They are very slow-moving, and can increase their pace of attack by swinging their legs around wildly instead of rocking them about. They try to bash James against their cage and strangle him with their feet. According to the Book of Lost Memories, the lattice indeed represents a bed-like frame, and the quote-unquote mouth on the abdomen represents Mary's mouth. According to Masahiro Ito, the lips in Silent Hill 2 are reflections of Mary's mouth, which abused James. The cage-like contraption and the human-like figure stuck to each frame could represent Mary being bedridden due to her terminal illness. The prisoners are 2 unseen monsters found in the cells of the Tolka prison. They seemingly chant some sort of ritual in a deep and monstrous voice. Interestingly enough, the radio does not produce static when near these monsters. The player themselves cannot see these monsters, but James readies his weapon regardless, and can even kill them by shooting them through the bars. They are, however, completely harmless. Their cry is eerily human-like. The Abstract Daddy, also known as the Ideal Father, is found in claustrophobic areas of Silent Hill. It is first encountered in a boss fight in the Labyrinth with Angela, later appearing in less durable forms in the Lakeview Hotel. Only Angela knows what she sees, her Abstract Daddy. James, players, and I can't see what she sees. We are on James's side. And who can say Abstract Daddy, which James sees, is the same as hers? The Abstract Daddy, at least the version that James sees, is a creature that seems to resemble 2 figures intertwined in a sex-like position over a bed frame, unable to change positions due to the flesh tying them both to the bed. It can be seen as a manifestation of the sexual and physical trauma Angela faced with her brother and her father, but for James, it can be seen as him sitting over Mary's deathbed. For Angela, the lower head of the monster represents the pain inflicted on her all over those years, but for James, he doesn't see it in the same way. Masahiro Ito explains that James will never know the drowning in her sea of flame. To James, this bed represents Mary being bedridden, resurfacing when the monster reappears in the Lakeview Hotel when he goes to find their quote-unquote special place, before her disease truly struck. According to Masahiro Ito, Abstract Daddy is probably tame to James compared to Angela, and that if we depicted the Abstract Daddy from her perspective, players wouldn't feel her as an impressive character. Fascinating story doesn't need too much description. The idea of thinking about what her Abstract Daddy looked like is truly terrifying. Pyramid Head, otherwise known as the Red Pyramid Thing, is a humanoid beast wearing butcher's attire akin to executioners of the town's past. The creature represents James's desire for punishment at the crushing guilt of murdering his wife, and making him remember his past actions, which James himself puts into words when two Pyramid Heads are brutally murdering a helpless Maria. Only after killing Eddie, another real human being, does the second Pyramid Head appear. Pyramid Head has many meanings, representing James's guilt and acting as a quote-unquote punisher, a representation of the town's history of execution, and James's sexual frustration. There are multiple scenes with Pyramid Head and other monsters that look very erotic, and Masahiro Ito said, "I purposely built the motions of the two creatures to look sexual, but to be accurate, it's not sexual." Masahiro Ito also states that he believes the sexual frustration theme for Pyramid Head has been over-exaggerated by fans, though, and overshadows the symbolism of him being something to punish James for his sins. Pyramid Head appears a lot during the game as a sort of quote-unquote chaser antagonist. The first scene with Pyramid Head is in the Woodside apartment, where James stumbles into Pyramid Head abusing and slaughtering two mannequins in a very sexual nature. James hides in a closet and escapes Pyramid Head, but encounters him again in Blue Creek Apartments, where James is attacked. Pyramid Head is then encountered in the Otherworld Hospital with Maria, who can also see Pyramid Head, which makes sense since she is the manifestation of Mary, even having some of Mary's memories. It chases them through the hallway, and James makes it safely to the elevator, but it closes before Maria can go inside. She slips her hand through the cracked elevator door and screams for her life as she is brutally skewered by Pyramid Head before the doors shut and James has to come to terms with Maria's one of many deaths throughout Silent Hill. Pyramid Head can be seen and found in the labyrinth after this and makes no attempt to chase James unless it is approached. The last time Pyramid Head is seen is in the Lakeview Hotel, where there is now two, manifested from the guilt of killing Eddie. He is forced to watch two Pyramid Heads brutally torture and kill a resurrected Maria right in front of him. As she is murdered once again, James falls to his knees. He finally realizes why his subconscious created them, due to his desire to punish himself.
I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins. But that's all over now. I know the truth. Now it's time to end this.
After a brief fight, the Pyramid Heads kill themselves by staking their blades underneath their masks. Their purpose has been fulfilled. Mary is the final boss of Silent Hill 2, encountered on the roof of the Lakeview Hotel. This boss is both the manifestation of Mary and Maria. The manifestation of Mary is very similar to the Flesh Lips, being a body strewn up on a bed-like frame, this time it being Mary's corpse on the metal frame. She is forced to remain upside down and screaming, the spikes on the bed representing Mary's pain and suffering from her illness and guilt of hurting James verbally throughout being bedridden. Mary can attack with a swarm of moths through her mouth, and she can also use a tentacle that she can use to whip or strangle him, almost similar to how James killed her by smothering her. According to the Book of Lost Memories, Mary's form, quote-unquote, embodies James's conflicted emotions towards Mary during her final days. Mary felt her disease was unfair. In her letter she writes,
When I first learned that I was going to die, I just didn't want to accept it.
She had been conflicted and confused. She wanted to die, but at the same time she feared it. She would lash out at James in frustration, and in turn, so does this boss. To James, it represents his confliction about what he really feels. If he still loved her or would still continue to love her. Or if he truly just wanted her out of the way. How hard he tried to look for a cure, but to no avail. In all endings apart from the Maria ending, the boss is actually Maria and not Mary, meaning Maria's feelings can also be intertwined with the boss. My personal theory is that Maria never existed in the first place, not even as a real human, but was created by Silent Hill to torment James and be the ideal wife Mary never could be, to try to lure him to stay into this perfect headspace of just her and him, and forgetting about Mary entirely. Silent Hill has a total of 4 endings, though none of them are canonical. According to the Book of Lost Memories, of the 4 conclusions, there is no one correct interpretation. Each ending indicates a different possibility. As James approaches the Lakeview Hotel rooftop, he sees a woman who appears eerily similar to his wife, of whom he mistakes for her. He realizes that it isn't Mary, but instead a desperate Maria, in a fleeting final effort to get James to accept her. When James refuses her offer, she becomes bitter and becomes the final boss. Upon defeating her, he is allowed to have one final meeting with Mary, and he explains the reason why he killed her.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not true. You also said you didn't want to die. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
That the guilt and resentment was just too much. That his heart just couldn't take it.
James, if that were true, then why do you look so sad?
Maria slips a letter into his hand before peacefully dying, and, as the letter plays, James leaves Silent Hill with Laura, the child Mary wanted to adopt, but never could. The letter is one of the hardest things to listen to in the entirety of Silent Hill 2. The emotion of the voice actress and the fact that it was all done in one take, and it was so emotional for her that it brought her to tears as she read, really shows that. It explains how Mary understands if James hates her because of how she acted towards him when she was ill, and how she's truly sorry for it, and that she wants him to live and be happy because he made her happy.
James, you made me happy.
One day, James will also be able to join her in their special place, and they'll be able to be happy together. The woman James sees sitting on the rooftop is once again Maria, and, similar to the Leave ending, begs him to accept her. He declines, and Maria is filled with rage once more and attempts to kill him. On death, James is granted time to spend with Mary on her deathbed.
Truth is, part of me hated you for taking away my life.
You killed me, and you're suffering for it. It's enough, James.
She laments he has suffered all too much from the painful guilt of murdering her, and she gives him her final letter before violently coughing and dying in his arms. He gently picks up her body and walks out the door. He goes back to his car, to the start of Silent Hill. He takes out her body from the back seat of the car and puts it in the passenger seat, so he won't forget, so he won't repress those memories. James does what he realized why he came to Silent Hill in the first place for. He was going to be together with Mary.
Now we can be together.
This ending requires James to spend a lot of time with Maria throughout the game. Since he is so close to Maria, the woman he meets on the lakeside rooftop identifies himself as Mary, who exclaims that she hasn't forgiven him for murdering her. To me, with my personal theory that Maria isn't real, like how the monsters of Silent Hill aren't real but can still hurt you, I believe this was Maria trying to tip the scales and make James think Mary hated him, even though that wasn't the case. After defeating Mary, James returns to Rosewater Park where him and Maria first met. Maria has been resurrected once more, content that James finally wants to forget about Mary and to accept her into his life, to bring him into her fantasy land. Maria gives James Mary's letter, and both Maria and James leave the town. As they leave, Maria begins to cough. Similar to the In Water and Leave endings, the woman on the roof of the hotel is once again Maria and not Mary, and she begins to attack James when he does not accept her. After killing her, James isn't granted to see his wife one final time. Instead, he rows her corpse in a boat to the Church of Rebirth on Tolka Lake Island to try to resurrect Mary by confronting the old gods of Silent Hill. The result is unknown. Which of these endings is the quote-unquote best ending? That's up for you to decide, but none of these endings are truly a happy ending, I think most can agree. To me, Leave is the best possible ending. He reads Mary's note and continues on with his life, and possibly adopts Laura like Mary never could. The letter says she wants him to live, to do the things that she never could, and then to join her when he's ready. In the In Water ending, James doesn't even read the letter, and instead does what he set out to do in the first place, which was commit suicide, which is the opposite of what Mary wanted him to do. He cuts his life short so that he can be with his wife, and Laura is once again left alone in the world, with no one to turn to. All the letters are the same in each ending with some slight changes in wording, so we know that she wanted him to continue living. In the In Water ending, she says,
That's why I want you to live for yourself now. Do what's best for you, James.
Maria is very much the worst ending, since James is now living in a fantasy of his own desire to be with a healthy version of Mary, which that dream doesn't seem to be even possible due to Maria coughing as they leave the scene. I wanted to bring up something someone named Rationator on YouTube noticed, which is when James says,
It's okay. I have you.
His eyes go from normal to constricted, and then go back to normal, and he is unable to focus on Maria. It's a very small detail, but I like to think it's James trying to fool himself into believing being with Maria really is the right choice. The Rebirth ending is a weird one, and can be a good or a bad scenario depending on the person. To me, it's bad. James is refusing to let Mary rest, and instead is using the supernatural powers of Silent Hill to bring Mary back, similar to the powers of the town used in Silent Hill 1 and 3. Since the result of the experiment is also unknown, it's definitely not the best scenario, at least in my opinion. Akira Yamaoka is the musical genius behind the soundtrack of Silent Hill 2. Its soundtrack is filled with ethereal songs and classic rock similar to Nine Inch Nails or other grunge of the time. Akira Yamaoka has even officially stated, "I love Trent Reznor," on his Twitter. I'm a fan of big classic rock myself, and songs like Theme of Laura, Angels Thanatos, and Love Psalm, and Overdose Delusion are clear examples of that. Personally, I feel like Silent Hill 2's soundtrack is done a bit better than Silent Hill 3's, mostly because of the lack of vocals. No cheesy lyrics, just the sounds of the guitar to whisk you away. Something sounding not of a game soundtrack, but of an album. The soundtrack is incredibly varied and beautiful, at least in my opinion. I feel like the Silent Hill 2 VR chat map, which I've been showing every now and then throughout this video, has made me realize how calming this soundtrack can really be. Walking the empty streets of Silent Hill 2, listening to the tracks playing on their corresponding streets, sitting down at a bench for a moment just to soak in the atmosphere. It's really opened my eyes to this soundtrack and its calming effect it's had on me. Each gorgeously atmospheric song fits perfectly with the locations they are tied to in Silent Hill, whether it's the streets or the buildings, examples being World of Madness and Null Moon. You wouldn't think something like this, something so serene, could work so well for a game so horrifying and dark as Silent Hill. It brings you back to the idea that Silent Hill wasn't all bad, that it used to be a town that people frequently visited as a tourism spot, but now has been left in a dreamlike state. Some of these songs, such as Ordinary Vanity, start out very tranquil, but then are followed by the uncomfortable clanging of metals, something looming in the distance. You can't quite discern what, but it's there, knocking the metal walls, making sure you know very well that its presence is known. These soothing songs can easily be brought to a screeching halt, though, when confronted with an enemy. Echoing hallways, screeching metals, moaning trumpets and tubas, almost sounding like someone is banging pots and pans in your ears, immediately putting you on edge. Air sirens are heard overhead. It's as if someone entered your room and started banging their hands on your door over and over and over. And then suddenly, it's gone. Back to the soothing music that was just happening before. The liminality of Silent Hill's atmosphere makes these changes and tonal shifts so much more impactful, and the experience of listening to the soundtrack on its own and not in-game is totally different. Being surrounded by the fog, the silence, the emptiness, and the quiet sound of your footsteps on the pavement as you walk through Silent Hill is something you can't recreate without playing it, and that truly is fascinating. Silent Hill 2 is a game that has affected me and many others. I feel as if many players can put themselves in the shoes of these characters, whether it's dealing with a loved one being bedridden due to an illness, being orphaned, being bullied, or being physically, sexually, or mentally abused by one's family. These are issues that many people face. Seeing a loved one on their deathbed, them lashing out at the people that they love most for seemingly no reason. A friend, maybe your significant other, your mother or father, maybe another family member. You want to help them, but you can't. The medicine isn't working, and the doctors aren't helping and only making money off this person that you care about so much. You try to visit, but they treat you with nothing but anger, but immediately 180 to being sad and alone, and you don't quite know what to feel. Are you mad? Are you sad? Do you resent them? You're only trying to help. This is a feeling too many people must deal with, because more often than not, as a person inches closer to death, they are more scared. The more panicked they become, the more they lose the grasp on the emotions that they were once in control of. The idea of going home is sickening. You just don't want to see them again. So many years of torment, all coming back in a flood of memories and emotions at the mere thought of this person. This could be a father or a mother, brother or sister, a cousin, an aunt or uncle, grandparents, just someone you wanted out of your life. Someone you'd rather never lay eyes on again. Perhaps they threw words at you that cut deep, so deep that they never left and remain in your nightmares. Maybe they hurt you physically, beat you, or hurt you in ways you don't even want to think about. Or possibly they sexually assaulted you. The idea of telling anyone they did these things is so scary, because what if they find out? What if they learn and they try to hurt you again? The idea of meeting new people and thinking they might do this to you like that person did to you back then makes new friends a lot scarier than it has any right to be. After all the pain you've suffered through all the people that you couldn't trust, all the people that hurt you, is there any point in living anymore? Beaten and bullied, kicked and made fun of, was it because of how you looked? Was it how you acted? Your voice? Was it because of what you liked? People that seemed to pop up time and time again, or people that followed you from place to place over time just to beat you down to boost their own sick self-esteem. Bullying doesn't just happen in school. Your coworkers and your boss could bully you, your family could bully you. The fun just never seems to end. Sometimes you may think, one day I'll stand up for myself, or have dreams of doing so. Just never seems to happen. Orphaned, alone, no family, no one to call mother or father or brother or sister. Just you. Perhaps you have step-parents. You watch kids in the park play with their parents, and you can see the resemblance of each child to their respective parents. You know you'll never have that, though. The feeling of being biologically related to someone. Maybe you become resentful of it, or you yourself are bullied for being orphaned. You'll never get having your real parents back, no matter how hard you try or how hard you wish. Instead, you must deal with what you have, the fake reality you're forced to live in. I bring all these scenarios up and explain each scenario in extensive detail because to me, Silent Hill 2 is a game that forces you to look upon yourself and your own issues and fight your own demons. To be introspective with yourself, and to come to terms with the things you don't want to face, or you don't want to think about. The things you bury deep inside. It made me think about my own problems, think of the issues I personally face, and hopefully with the script I could write my own feelings into each of these scenarios, because there are definitely some things in this game that hurt me a little more than I'd like. Some things that cut a little too deep. We're not perfect. We're all human. And in the end, we can only run so far before breaking down. Take a moment to think about the things possibly tormenting you now. Look deep inside yourself and close your eyes. Let the music take you as you feel around for the things that break you open. The traumas, your problems, your fears. What makes you fear them? Coming to terms with these feelings is a hard thing to do, and beating your personal pyramid head inside of you can feel impossible. But you can do it. Just takes time. And don't be afraid to break down and cry, to open up, to express your emotions in the way you know how. Because I promise, from the bottom of my heart, there are people who care and are willing to help you. You can survive Silent Hill. I wanted to do a special thank you for anybody who watched till the end of this video. This is an hour-long video essay, and I've never done anything like this on my channel or in my life in general. And it's completely new to me, and you know, I've never done something like this, but it's something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to do video essays or stuff about games that I like, because I like writing and I like editing and I think it's really fun, but I've never just had the drive to do it. And for some reason Silent Hill 2 made me want to do it, and made me want to go through with it and write a script. And I didn't realize how much work this would take, because I finished the script in about a day and a half with some edits in between, like just some extra stuff that I didn't think of and added post. And recording took about a day, and with some extra stuff as well, because Audacity ruined some of my audio, so I had to re-record it. But for the most part, recording and script writing took about a day, maybe a little longer. But editing this has taken me about a week, and it made me realize how much effort and time is put into these types of videos, and also makes me appreciate the channels that do this kind of stuff for a living, like some of the channels that I mentioned in the credits, like Zeltic or Liam Triforce or Thaf9 or Frederick Knudsen, just all those wonderful people that I love and I love watching. And you know, it's a little bit humbling. I'd say it's a little bit humbling. And hopefully I do have the drive to do stuff like this more, because this was incredibly fun to make. It was incredibly fun to look through theories and just different stuff that I didn't even know about the game and really delve into it. And I've been absolutely obsessed with it for the past couple weeks, like 2 weeks, where I'm just listening to the music constantly or talking about it. And you know, it's been really nice, and you know, it's been really nice to make this video. So hopefully if you did watch throughout the whole thing and you didn't skip through it and stuff, that you did enjoy it, and that this was actually a good video essay to sit through, because some people don't have the patience to sit through an hour-long video like this, especially if it's not competently scripted or edited. I don't have a lot of editing practice, but I do feel very happy with how this turned out, and there are a lot of parts in this video that I'm super proud of and how they came out, and I feel like I did a pretty decent job with it. So, you know, if you have any tips or things I could do better, let me know. Just hit me up in the comments and I'll read through them and see what I can do better if I do decide to do a video essay like this again. But yeah, thank you. Just thank you so much.